power systems, an in-universe system that explains powers and abilities of the characters. One of the most important details in shonen anime, the most dependent factor for entertaining fights. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opus Otaku, the place where I blabber about Japanese cartoons. In this video, I will be reviewing and rating power systems in anime. This is not going to be rated by potential and amount of damage, but rather by how much it improves fights and battles in anime. Also, this video took a lot of time, effort, and research to make, so please consider subscribing and sharing this with your friend Roonies. So starting off, we have stands from Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, a really popular power system. Almost everyone who watches anime knows about it. Even though it's from memes, it counts. This is a great power system which creates various and interesting fights. Each and every person has their individual power, and each and every one of them have a lot of potential. Strength only depends on the user's creativity and determination. You can get a power something so ridiculous such as stopping time and lose to someone who simply has super strength and super speed. The fights are always unpredictable and fun to watch. There's also an upgrade for stands called Requiems, even though I'm not going to go into detail because I don't want to spoil anything. The origins of stands are really interesting and not imbalanced. There are two ways to get a stand, with one being that you were born with it and manifest it later on, or be struck by a specific arrow. If you are struck by an arrow, your descendants are also given stands, and stands usually manifest when they're in a really tight situation. And as such, stands are going to be going in the S tier. Amazing power system. Next up, we have magic, and more specifically, magic from Black Clover. I would have loved it if they changed the name. Magic seems very vague and common. I love the fact that you need grimoires for advanced magic, and that each leaf in a clover represents something. But it usually comes down to one element, like wind, lightning, fire, etc. Even one of our protagonists just has wind powers, which is a bit boring. Mana is something that is in all isekai anime and kind of appears everywhere in anime. I'm a huge fan of spirit magic though, but I'm not gonna go into detail because I don't know how to talk about it without spoiling. Now, even though everyone has their specific element, there is not enough diversity between their spells. Everyone has a maximum of 2 to 5 spells which are used repeatedly. Take Leopold for example. Even though he has a couple of different spells, they're all only fire based, so they do the same type of damage, but each spell, I'm guessing, are on different levels of damage and knockback. So it's not really fun to watch because the only thing he does is shoot fire. Same with most other people, and it is quite uncommon for people to have interesting powers. The fact that not everyone has an equal amount of mana, or that they can't train to increase their mana, makes it interesting to see how people with less mana fight using creative ways. The fact that new spells are mostly developed during battles make us skip the pain of training art. Getting new spells is like human evolution, where the only way to get new spells is through inescapable situations. So considering all of this, I will be giving magic a decent place in the B tier. The third power system in this tier list is Alchemy from Fullmetal Alchemist. This is a great power system, and the concept of giving something to gain something makes perfect sense. Now, the limits are endless due to the basic rule being that you study something, deconstruct it, and reconstruct it. It's just modifying matter. The only problem with Alchemy though is that it isn't really suited for fighting. Sure, people like Scar and Mustang develop their own transmutation circles for attacks, but normally the only way to attack is shaping the ground like a punch. Kimberly has Explosion Alchemy, where the only attack is making explosions with no real strategy. There's no variety between the attacks, which I crave. Another thing is that users of Alchemy are not magic users, instead they're all scientists who study the structure of matter, obviously so that it's possible to reconstruct it. Here's an example. Say you're trying to reconstruct a car into a fridge, because fridges are cool, pun not intended. And yes, I know it's not scientifically possible to build a fridge from a car without extra supplies. But let's say you could, in which you would have to study and gain knowledge about both the fridge and the car. If you've not studied about it, you would be just left with a destroyed car, not knowing how to fix it into a fridge. You could literally turn coal into diamonds with enough skill in alchemy, but when there's no variety between the attacks, the fights become kind of boring, and since a power system's main function is to make interesting fights, I'll have to give alchemy a place in the stinky C tier. It is a great power system for everything other than for fights though. Next up, we have Chakra from Naruto. There's a lot of things you can do, but again, it's based on 5 elements, which I'm not usually a fan of. Everything is based on your family and bloodline. If you come from a bad clan, your powers are limited. On the other hand, every clan has their specific power, for example, Sharingan in the Uchiha clan. Now, I would have loved it if there weren't so many versions for Sharingan. Just the 3 stages and Mangekyo Sharingan would have been enough, instead of Mangekyo Sharingan varying from person to person. It can be very hard to follow and remember each Uchiha clan member's abilities. Now, as I said, I'm not a fan of element-based power systems because there's almost only one type of attack. But then there are rare gems like Minato's power, which, if I remember correctly, he can teleport to wherever he yeets his knives. Ninjutsu is very stereotypical, but it's done in an amazing way. Either way, Chakra is a great power system, and since each clan has their own specific style, it makes up for the blandness of element-based techniques. It's also great when some characters combine their clan's technique with their element-based techniques. Overall, I'll give Chakra an A, with element-based techniques dragging it down quite a bit. For the 5th power system on this list, we have Quirks from My Hero Academia. This is probably one of the most diverse power systems, which can go from getting a freaking tail to the generic super strength. In my opinion, the origin of Quirks is a bit wanky and not really anything interesting. The origins of a power system are quite important, and just 80% of the world population have Quirks lol won't cut it. Sure, quirks are completely normal for someone in the My Hero Academia universe, almost like a body part, but for us, it is something. That's why I would have loved a better origin, like for example, in Attack on Titan, Eldians are descendants of Ymir, who formed a pact with the devil. So the existence of Eldians makes perfect sense. Now, another thing I dislike about quirks is that there are no detriments or risks in general. For example, if you eat a devil fruit, you have the risk of drowning. Now obviously, since you're born with quirks and you have no control over it, there shouldn't be any detriment. But in my opinion, the more powerful the quirk is, the more risk it should have. But I swear, why the fuck is getting a tail quirk? Oh my god. Now, I feel like quirks don't really make sense most of the time, and here's why. In some cases, quirks are given a scientific explanation, like Bakugo's quirk, which is the fact that he sweats nitroglycerin instead of just normal sweat, and ignites it, which results in explosions. Now, that's great and all, but another guy can magically summon a shadow bird demon thing from his chest. Now, if you think about it, quirks are kind of just like the same as devil fruits or stands, where everyone are given different powers, but then the mangaka uses quirks in such a bad way. For example, in Jojo, the stands are all super weird, and so are quirks in My Hero Academia. Tail. But why are Jojo fights so much better than My Hero Academia fights? That's because quirks are kind of all over the place from one singular source. There can be classifications, but so many of them just don't fit. For example, this earphones instead of ears here can emit sound waves, but is a mutant. You could call this an inconsistency, but the same happened with the Mochi Mochi no Mi from One Piece, and Oda just decided to just create a new class called Special Paramecia. Now obviously, stands are also messy, but at least they're completely messy with no system. But quirks try to be sorted when half of them are just inconsistencies and don't make sense. The fights are nowhere near as crazy enough as Jojo or as satisfying as One Piece. The mangaka doesn't make good use of quirks, and as such, they become really average fights. So because of this, I'll be throwing quirks in, again, the stinky C category. The next and final power system we will be examining today is Cursed Energy from Jujutsu Kaisen. starting off with the explanation and origins of cursed energy. It is absolutely amazing. It is born from negative emotions such as anger, hate, and grief, which is fantastic. These negative emotions also enable you to see cursed spirits, which are pure negative emotions. In my speculation, cursed energy manifests in people to counter or compensate for those negative emotions. So the more sadness and grief you experience, the stronger your cursed energy is. For example, Yuji was able to use cursed energy perfectly in a situation where his life was on the line and wounds from his late grandfather were fresh. But a few days later, his sadness and fear depleted, and he wasn't able to use it as well. If you remove the origins and the activation method, it seems the same as stands, Nen, and devil fruits. The way you summon it is a completely new method. For example, the way you summon your stand is based on your fighting spirit and life energy, which is manifested physically. So stands are a physical manifestation of your fighting spirit and life energy. The same way cursed energy is summoned by negative emotions and feelings. Again, it is quite similar to Nen, devil fruits, or stands, in which everyone has their specific power. Unlike devil fruits though, cursed energy powers manifest depending on your situation to suit perfectly. Also, the flow of cursed energy doesn't come naturally because you have to maintain it and control it. When Yuji learned his divergent fist technique, his cursed energy wasn't able to keep up with the speed of his hand, resulting in the damage being delayed. This was due to Yuji's inexperience in controlling his cursed energy. I mostly complain when the main characters have the simple power of super strength and super speed, but this time I absolutely loved Yuji's powers. Even though it is just super strength, there are a lot of important factors to use it correctly. It is not as simple as concentrating cursed energy into your hand, like Gon just has to concentrate his Nen into his hand. Amazing origin, gives birth to super interesting fights, and not too complicated. So cursed energy will be earning a spot in the luxurious S tier. With that, I will wrap up today's video because the script is over 2,000 words long and that's way too much. I will be doing a part 2 though, which you have to stay tuned for if you enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave your favorite anime power system in the comments below if you want to be in the next video. Also, please subscribe. Thank you. Bye.